Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. Climate alarmists say they love Arctic ice, but they get very excited when there's bad news and they get very upset when there's good news. 3 years ago, the New York Times was very excited about low winter sea ice extent. March 22, 2017, Arctic's winter sea ice drops to its lowest recorded level. It's a little difficult to understand how Arctic sea ice could be dropping during winter when it's minus 30 degrees Celsius, but the New York Times has a different view of science. And now, 3 years later, Arctic winter sea ice extent is essentially normal. Arctic sea ice extent is higher now than 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015, 2012, 2011, 2010, 2006, and 2005. In the 2017 article, Mark Cerise from the National Snow and Ice Data Center said, "This is just another exclamation point on the overall loss of Arctic sea ice coverage which we've been seeing." This is the same Mark Cerise who in 2008 predicted the North Pole would be ice-free that year. And 13 years ago, Mark Cerise announced that the Arctic is screaming. Yes, the Arctic was screaming in 2007, and NASA predicted that the Arctic would be ice-free by 2012. 4 years ago, Mark Cerise suggested that a group of sailors could sail to the North Pole. Fortunately, they didn't take him up on his offer. This graph plots Arctic sea ice extent for every day going back to January 1st, 2006. The red line is the 365-day mean, and as you can see, there's been essentially no trend in Arctic sea ice extent over the last 14 years. The 365-day mean is a little bit low right now, but it'll come back up again with the current high extent. I don't see anything in this graph which looks like screaming. But what I do see is that climate experts who've been predicting the imminent demise of Arctic sea ice have no clue what they're talking about. Climate alarmists were very concerned about winter extent a few years ago, but now that it's very high, they've decided that it's no longer important, and now what's important is thickness. This is the current sea ice thickness map from the Danish Meteorological Institute. They show that the average thickness in the central Arctic is about 2 meters or 7 feet. The ice along the Canadian coast is more like 3 to 5 meters thick, and along the Siberian coast it's more like 1 meter thick. But the average thickness is something like 2 meters or 7 feet. This is the same thickness which the New York Times reported in 1958. New York Times, October 19, 1958. The changing face of the Arctic. Some scientists estimate that the polar ice pack is 40% thinner and 12% less in area than it was a half century ago, and that even within the lifetime of our children, the Arctic Ocean may open, enabling ships to sail over the North Pole. Although the idea that a solid ice sheet covers the central Arctic has lingered stubbornly in the popular fancy, the northern cap of ice worn by our planet is actually a thin crust, on the whole only about 7 feet thick over an ocean 2 miles deep in places. In other words, Arctic sea ice was about the same 60 years ago as it is now. This graph from the 1985 Department of Energy report projecting the climatic effects of increasing carbon dioxide showed that Arctic sea ice extent was very low during the 1940s and the 1950s. And experts were predicting that the Arctic would be ice-free within a generation. So the ice thickness argument doesn't work very well for climate alarmists either. 2 years ago, Eric Holthaus announced, "A truly shocking moment. Multi-year sea ice is essentially gone over most of the Arctic." The only way that could happen would be if the Arctic became ice-free, because any ice which survives the summer immediately becomes multi-year ice. Arctic alarmists like to recycle the same story over and over again. In 2009, Canada's leading Arctic expert David Barber announced that multi-year ice was effectively gone. And apparently 9 years later, it disappeared again. And in 1922, the multi-year ice between the North Pole and Alaska and Siberia was also gone. Stephenson was one of the few Arctic explorers at the time, and he reported that the region extending from the North Pole towards Alaska and eastern Siberia consisted of new, thin, rotten ice. But David Barber reported in 2009 that vast sheets of impenetrable multi-year ice, which can reach up to 80 meters thick, have for centuries blocked the path of ships seeking a quick shortcut through the fabled Northwest Passage. This idea was debunked by the New York Times in 1958. And was also debunked by Stephenson in 1922. And was also debunked by Amundsen and the New York Times in 1907. Amundsen reported that he saw the Northwest Passage open on the first year of his voyage, which was 1903. David Barber, like other climate experts, has no clue what he's talking about. He predicted that the Arctic ice would be gone by 2015, for the first time in 1 million years. However, the Arctic was ice-free 6,000 years ago, around the time when Stonehenge was built. I'm pretty sure that's less than 1 million years ago. I wrote this article in the Register in 2008 pointing out that Arctic experts have no clue what they're talking about. The article was titled, "Arctic Ice Refuses to Melt as Ordered." And since then, there's been essentially no trend in Arctic sea ice extent. Congressional Democrats don't like me wrecking their scam by telling the truth, so they want me censored on YouTube. They don't like me exposing their dangerous climate misinformation, so they accuse me of doing exactly what it is that they're doing. But I have no interest in having them censored. What I want to do is have a debate and show that they're wrong. Climate alarmists say that I'm destroying the planet, but when I ask them for a debate, they say that they have more important things to do. So apparently they have more important things to do than saving the planet. A couple days ago, Scott Adams said that my scientific views were not credible and that he wouldn't debate me because he didn't want to legitimize what I'm saying. However, the only way he would legitimize my views would be if he lost the debate. If he defeated me in debate, he would delegitimize me. People who are confident of their position are eager to debate, but people who aren't confident in their position shy from it. Climate alarmism is a farce, and climate alarmists understand that the only chance they have of winning a debate is if the other side isn't allowed to speak, which is why they demand censorship. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.